Well, hello and welcome to the Power Chat. Here with me are Anna Christensen and Patrick Goodwill. 4 years ago, they created a company called Magnetic Insight. I want to start by asking you, how did you think about starting a company?
So I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. Back in college even, I was writing business plans. I think we went through 3 or 4 in college, then in grad school we did it a couple times. We won some business plan competitions. And so something that I always knew that I wanted to do. So that's kind of what was in my background that I've always enjoyed and enjoyed doing these different aspects of entrepreneurship, both on the idea generation and following through onto building the company. And so I think with Anna was the first time that I've actually had the experience of truly building something just beyond me and a couple of friends. And it's been quite a journey. So that's kind of what's in my background.
Yeah.
So I actually never thought of going into entrepreneurship.
Oh, wow.
I've been part of larger organizations and running bigger teams, and perfectly happy that way. Sort of got up the ladder in corporate America, and then had a meeting with Patrick and his advisor to pitch a technology to one of the companies I was working at. And I was sitting in the boardroom with my team, and after going through that presentation, we basically had to lift our jaws from the floor. Couldn't believe what we were seeing, because
Wow.
in the world of imaging and diagnostics, we haven't had a new set of physics in 20 or 30 years. And so we had these compounding issues with imaging to be able to solve certain problems that we haven't been able to do with incumbent technologies. And here comes this guy out of Berkeley who's basically showing us solutions to all of it with one technology. And so we couldn't believe it. At the end of the day, we decided as a company not to bring it in, largely because it was just too early on for a multi-billion-dollar company, which is pretty obvious. But I could not stop thinking about this technology. I could not stop thinking about how much it's going to impact research in medicine. And in some way, I need to help Patrick with this. And so with trying to help him with his business plan and trying to figure out, well, you should do this on your own. You should create an organization, get something out there, and we're all going to come after you, because all we want to do really is to put a label on it and commercialize it with you. And about a few months after that, looking for a CEO, came in like, would you consider being a CEO? And I'm like, wow, maybe. And it was a big decision. It was the decision of cutting golden handcuffs, strapping on a parachute, and jumping off a cliff. And it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. I'm completely unemployable now, and it's been a great ride so far.
It's been a great ride. I am an investor from day one. Well, actually, from the first time they came to look for angel investment outside of your network. But we're talking about some of the technology. What was the basics of this? And this is a very interesting pair, because rarely you see somebody who has a strong technology and the willingness to take the risk to make it into the commercial world, and you have the experience of the industry. And when you combine them together, it's like an explosion of possibilities, and it creates a much, much robust business model, because you have the best of the business world and the technology world together. So how is the technology different? What is the breakthrough in this type of technology?
So the best way that I can explain what's different in this technology is to go do a little bit of history. So as we all know, medical imaging has really changed how we do medicine. So where there's the first types of medical imaging was X-ray back in the 1800s, 1900s. X-ray, ultrasound, nuclear medicine, CT, and we don't have very many types of technology. We actually have only 4 types, so if we include MRI in there as well. And they're all based on different types of physics. And so fundamentally, what's so unique about our technology is it's a type of medical imaging that's a different physics basis. And what that means is we use the technology for what it's good for. MRI is good for looking at, say, the brain. CT is great for looking at, say, bones. What we're great at looking at is the immune system. we're great at looking at how blood is flowing. And these are very different things that we can't do with existing technologies. And the reason fundamentally that we can do them better than the existing is that we're just a different physics, is a different basis for how it works. So that's what's really underlying it. And we haven't even explored all the things that we can do with it yet. We are the first company to just bring this out into the field and start having all sorts of doctors and scientists and engineers start to use the technology. And after a few years from now, the amount of things that we can do with it will multiply exponentially, just because it's going to open up whole new areas.
So besides having your enthusiasm for starting a company and the entrepreneurial drive, you also had to dive deep into a technology. Mm-hmm. What did you study and how did you come about to this breakthrough technology?
Mm-hmm. So it's sort of the history of what the technology was at UC Berkeley. So it was first invented by a group over at Philips Healthcare in the Netherlands. So it's about 2005 they published. And 2006, we read their paper and we started a program there. And we realized that we had all of the underpinnings to be able to understand how it worked and to develop from there. So we started working on theory in the early years, trying to understand, like, how does this work physically? And we discovered that it works in a very different way than the way that they envisioned. And so it was a very different mathematical basis that we traveled down. Going down that path for a while, we started to say, okay, the math drives what sort of machines we build. So we started building larger and larger machines, starting with ones, that about this big, eventually getting to something very similar to what we're selling right now, which is a 3,000 pound piece of metal with a lot of electromagnets. There's all sorts of stuff going on in there. Mm-hmm. And it's just that as we were stepping along, we started to get to the spot where we didn't fit into the university anymore. So within the university, it's great for understanding basic physics. It's great for early experiments. But once we're getting to the spot where we're knocking holes in the walls and we're building like buildings within the building and changing the infrastructure of the university, we realized that we're just hitting the limits of what's reasonable for even one of the best institutions in the world. And so that's at the point where I started looking outside to find some help, because I am fundamentally an engineer, and that's something that I realized with all of my entrepreneurial endeavors. I'm fundamentally an engineer. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy people management, but I am not going to run a company. That's why I started looking out, like, hey, what sort of companies out there could we integrate with? Because at that time I was a little bit burned out, but what kind of companies could we integrate with? And that's when I met Anna. And it was very clear that, hey, she could run a company like this. And that's how we got started for that part.
Anna, and you coming from the industry, from the applications, one of the things that we see in entrepreneurs is their capacity to transform the world. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people have a lot of dreams, mm-hmm. but when you know the industry, mm-hmm. you can really make things happen. What are the things that make you believe that this was transformational? What are the things that you knew fundamentally, not from the technology part, but from the commercial side?
Sure.
What were the things that made you fall in love with this idea?
As I was saying earlier, that being in this industry for over 20 years, you learn what the pain points are, uh-huh. and where research is moving, and the technology behind that research wasn't supporting the direction it was going. For instance, we're now looking at a completely different route of treating cancer with immune cells. Mm-hmm. We have no idea where they go once you inject them in the body. Yeah. We've tried. I mean, we can follow them for maybe a day or so with PET imaging. Optical has always been a very popular modality, but you can't see skin deep. It attenuates out. And so we couldn't see the biology happening where the real biology happens, mm-hmm. right? So deep in the animal or deep in the human. Mm-hmm. And we tried so many ways of massaging incumbent technologies. Uh-huh. We just weren't getting the data. And so we knew what we needed. We just didn't know that there was a technology out there that could give us that. And so mixing how we solve major problems in research and medicine and combining it with a technology that can be commercialized, scaled, and basically grow into a high valued business, that's like a perfect trifecta.
I just think it's a great combination.
Exactly.
But for you, it would have been difficult to make the jump from corporate to entrepreneurial management. Did you see any differences in that when you decided to come and do you run it from zero, right?
We ran it from zero. Yeah. It was a dive. It was a jump off a cliff, as I said. I didn't really know what to expect because I didn't have that background of, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to read all these books on entrepreneurship. I knew how to run a team and a business in this area pretty well. So I didn't know what to expect. But I knew that if I didn't do this, I'd regret it my whole life. And it was that drive to want to be a part of something this big and give it wings that drove me to the decision.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it must be very proud. Both of you. I am proud. we still need to make, as an investor, we still need to make some money. But it's really amazing. Money,
so it'll come to the
It's really amazing. And we're just in their new facility. So you're moving here in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So this is a great facility. We don't have a chance to show it around. But did you ever feel that this was going to fail? And how did you manage that fear of failure? Because you're an engineer, you're a scientist, you can be employed by somebody else. Probably you could too. But as you just said, once you make the jump, you get out of the corporate system, it just changes your life. So did you feel that, how do you manage the fear of failure, or do you still feel that you're going to fail? And how do you manage emotionally that fear?
Yeah, there's always that fear, and it's not failing per se. It's more like failing the team. I think when you start a company and you hire people, it's not just you anymore. Yeah, you're taking care of a team. My job as a CEO, there's a lot of things that people say, you're CEO, you're responsible. I'm responsible for people. I am responsible for making our people successful. And if I'm not making them successful, then I am failing. And it's not as binary as we didn't raise money and we're going to have to close the doors. It's as honest as if I'm not making our admin, our software folks, our salespeople, if I'm not giving them what they need to be successful, then that is what I consider my failure. And I do think about it every day. And that's sort of how I come into the office, knowing what do I need to do to make sure the team has every advantage possible. How is it that Patrick can work with his team and give them what they need? So I don't think there was this time where we said, okay, we're going to have to close doors. It was all about how we were going to move forward. If something didn't happen that we wanted to happen, what is our plan B? And so many conversations that Patrick and I had was, this is what we're working to have happen. This is what we're going, that's the game. That's where we're going after. That's the carrot. And what is it in between the carrot now, and what kind of levers can we pull? How do we, if we're not getting this funding, how do we find funding elsewhere? How do we slow down things and take it at a different pace? To what levers do we take that we would have to downsize but keep going? So it wasn't the question of not always moving forward. It was how fast, if we have to draw it back, and right now we're in a great situation because not only do we see what's ahead of us, we're in fast acceleration mode. Yeah, which is a whole other set of worries, right? Yeah. We're gonna have to have you come next year. Yeah, after you're here, and then we can film all the things that you're doing. Now, walk us through the process of funding, because one of the things that I say is that funding is not one event; it's a series of connected events, and you've gotten funding from a lot of sources. And as an investor and as a person that wants to foster high impact companies, I'm always thinking of a way to make the funds much more efficient. So walk us through the process of funding, and feel free to jump in because
because you've been doing the funding together, and then I have some interesting questions. But walk us through how was that process and where you are at the moment. You just told us in LinkedIn that you raised some money as well from a grant, and I know that you raised some money now from a large VC. We were all looking at that.
Yeah.
And our group and discussing, oh, this is going to go this way. This is not able to do anything. And we're like, okay, we trust them.
Yeah.
And you did a great job. So if you could walk us through the process and the maybe the surprises, the aha moments, and the questions. Well, you just told us.
Yeah. So it's sort of interesting. The way that Patrick and I started the company and we continually run it, we are co-founders in the very purest sense. And what makes it work is that he has his domain, I have my domain, and we help each other with it. But we also sort of trust each other with our domains. He's development, R&D, where I'm operations, commercial. And we also see fundraising in that way. And our goal is from the beginning was, let's raise only what we need. Because we knew early on, and part of starting the company, we needed to get to revenue generation pretty quick. Doing capital equipment, I mean, it could be just a sink.
How much is this? How much is the price? Because people don't know that. How much is the price of one machine?
One machine is about $650,000.
So it's not a cheap sale.
No,
How long is the sales process?
So depending on the application and the research market we're going after, it can be anywhere from 3 months to 2 years. So capital equipment's that way. And so we started selling literally when we started the company. We went in evangelist mode and started selling to the point where we actually had a product to ship. And we shipped our first product within 2 years of starting the company, which for something like this is pretty quick, even for a large company.
It is pretty quick.
So the way we developed the company out, it was never an R&D endeavor. It was a commercialization of a technology that Patrick had already developed out of UC Berkeley. But to get back to the funding, it was really important to us to take only what we need. And it's also a risk because everyone says, if they're going to give you money, take it. Take whatever's on the table. Yeah, that's always a nice thing to have, but we know a lot of other co-founders out there that it wasn't a great decision for them. So we were lucky enough to take what we needed, and we supplemented it, and I'll let Patrick talk a little bit about it, with non-dilutive funding. And because magnetic particle imaging is so incredibly innovative and foundational, and it goes into so many areas from stroke to cancer to cell therapy, there's a lot of opportunity for funding to grow out those areas. So I'll let you, talk a little bit about how we supplemented with.
Sure. So when I was still at the university working with our third co-founder, Steve Connolly, we raised a lot of funding from the NIH, from the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, from some foundation, the Keck Foundation. And so the technology is, as Anna was saying, it's fundamentally innovative and new. And the NIH has been one of our biggest supporters. And this was back at the university. And then once we started the company, I was like, all right, well, to start something this big, we're going to need a lot of help. And so we immediately started writing grants for the NIH. I wrote them with Anna as well. And so some of our first funding was from an NIH grant. So we raised almost $1 million from NIH granting, just grant funding right out of the gate. And at the same time that Anna was just pounding the pavement, talking to also all the angel investors that she could, and they came in almost exactly at the same time. It was pretty amazing. And that's when we went and we found an office. We started buying parts. We started getting all the different engineers together. I started pulling in some of my old students, and that's the very small genesis of what it's taken to get to where we are. And that was just, oh my God, that was 4 years ago.
How many people were in the company 4 years ago?
1, 2, and 3. So our engineer, who's our director of software. And so we would sit in this tiny incubator where this is this massive facility, and we had 2 cubicles in a room. Yeah. And so we started pulling in outside engineering help. We started building an engineering team. Anna immediately hit the ground running, trying to start to make sales. Like this was, we had no product yet. We were already evangelizing.
That's
And-
good.
Yeah.
That's the commercial you use.
Yes,
That's a great thing.
I was
Mhm.
sales, marketing, and chief copy officer. So.
And we were raising funding, and very, very quickly we got to the point where, just based off that initial round of funding, that Sandhill came in a little bit after that, and the NIH grant funding, we were able to install our first machine. Our first machine looks almost identical to this. There's just a lot of internal updates, but externally it looks the same. And that one we installed at Stanford probably just less than 2 years in. Then once that was up there, we were, we started to apply for a lot more grants, and then we started raising a lot more funding. And so that's when we had our Series Seed, happened a little bit later. And it's been quite the journey ever since then. It's just been go, go, go. I would say the purest on the engineering side of where we're just building the product, for me personally, was only in that initial time. And after that, we've been building a team and trying to, it's a lot of managing a lot of my old students who it's a very personal experience where I pulled these people over from Berkeley that they've been studying with me and Professor Connolly for the past 5 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Our team is very much devoted to the product. They believe like what's behind it and where we're going. And that's been a big aspect of why it's also been stressful, as to describe what Anna, or to dovetail on what Anna was saying earlier, that this has been quite the journey.
So what percentage of the funding that you've received so far would you say comes from grants or undiluted funds?
I would say we're probably at about 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think we're at about 4 million in grants so far. And so.
And it's also the matter of trust and credibility and being able to pull resources from the technical field, which is very important for these type of companies.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think coming together to raise funds as a team, has it been better, worse?
I would do most of the introduction. I would actually develop the investor relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I knew that there was a relationship there and we wanted to move forward, I would bring Patrick into it.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, has a team, and his focus is to develop the product.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have diluted a lot of our efforts if I had to pull Patrick into all the investor meetings
Mm-hmm.
that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not efficient that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, many investors have sweet spots for different areas. And when I did find someone say, okay, let's continue this, and I knew that there was a potential opportunity, then I would bring Patrick into the mix. And usually by that time, the investor would say, okay, we're going to do a little bit more due diligence, and they'll bring someone with engineering chops or whatever. So it's good to have Patrick there. So,
Mm-hmm.
they can talk about magnets and all that other stuff.
Do they ask you different questions?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, based on your expertise?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say I absolutely loved how Anna developed the whole fundraising strategy. So
Mm-hmm.
so it was an evolution, and
Mm-hmm.
so Anna handled most of the fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
So including all the initial lead generation, introductions, the initial meetings, and then at the point that I would come in, I was just still sitting in the back. It was that Anna was running the pitch, she was doing the pitch, and I was just there as a technical co-founder,
Mm-hmm.
that if there were technical questions, I was very happy to answer them. And so I was there to support her.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was quite an experience to watch that from from the side. And it was a good experience, and I think it turned out wonderfully. But it was stressful.
It's always stressful. It's always stressful, yeah. Especially when people don't like to continue the conversation, when people reject the idea of investing.
As I say, go for the no.
Okay,
it's
very good.
It's
Go for the no.
Go for
Never
the no,
thought about that.
and you don't waste your time on a no. And when I look at new entrepreneurs and we talk about different investors, they really want to have this certain investor or that investor, and they go after. I'm like, they've already said no. walk.
Oh.
Let them come after you if they really want you, but give them a chance and go for the no. It's really hard, and I'm saying it very easily now, but I was at the beginning, one of those type A personalities that if someone says no, my first thought was, they didn't really understand it. It was my fault. I didn't explain it well. I'm going to have to, and I would say 99% of the time, the no meant a no. There's nothing really you can do. It's you just move on. And, we're in the Silicon Valley, so there is just so much investment opportunity here. Just keep on going, keep on moving, network, connect, make the no a subtle no so that it doesn't follow you. Because if you really push, it just might follow you, and investors talk. So
yes, we do talk. But is there anything that happened, any shift in your approach to funding that made a significant change in the way you were raising funds?
Yeah. I think we discussed this earlier, that in my preparation, I stopped being an entrepreneur and I started becoming an investor. And I think that sort of pivot in the way I talked about a company.
How so? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So as an entrepreneur, and sort of the truth behind all of us is that we're passionate about what we do. We want to change the world. We want to make an impact on people around us, not only as us as entrepreneurs, but as scientists and human beings. And so you get caught up of how cool the technology is and all the things it can do. But you stop asking, what's the business model? What's the viability? What's the payback? What's the ROI? What's the exit? What's, the multiple? And the more you disconnect with how cool an idea is, the passion's great, keep the passion, but, and you connect with literally the brass tacks of investment. Why are investors investing in you? Right? They're not here to make you feel good. They're here to turn an income, to make a good investment. They're betting on you versus hundreds of other companies. And so you have to understand what the 100 other companies are offering them. And how is it that you can stand out from the eyes of an investor? And the pitch slowly went that way. It went as if I was an internal investor pitching to my investor friends. Right? And so that's sort of, if more entrepreneurs did that, I think within a pitch situation, people would be speaking the same language rather than this sort of, these investors didn't really understand. They know nothing, and you weren't speaking their language, right?
Well, I went through that when I was raising funds, but it took me a long time to realize that.
I got hurt.
They don't understand. They're stupid, and then I realized, well, I'm not getting anywhere with that.
Exactly.
Exactly. So that's. But I think that's a great insight: is to speak the language of the investor if you're pitching to an investor. I guess you have to speak the language of the grant. I don't know how you call it, the person making the decision to give you a grant, because it's a completely different.
It's a different audience.
Yeah.
So it's all about, with everything, it's tuning our message to the audience. So with grants, it's a scientist audience, and so scientists aren't necessarily the most interested in making money. They do want us to make a significant impact on whether it's human health, which is the overall goal of all of our grants, or science, or workflow, or their research is ideally the place that we want to impact people the most. So for us to read our audience is when I'm writing a grant, I have to put myself in the shoes of other scientists, and fortunately, our customers right now are other scientists. So oftentimes we'll just go ask them. It's like, all right, so if I'm writing about this model, does that impact your research, your day-to-day? And if we could do this better, will that change, your workflow, your research, what you do over the next, 10 years? And so when we write from that perspective, and see, it's not about making money, it's about, affecting either research or medicine. That's where we have had a lot of success.
That's pretty good. Yeah. And what about selling?
Mhm.
How does that work?
Well, this is a sort of an interesting community that we're selling into. Many of the folks that buy these systems have sort of a bipolar life. They are clinical radiologists. They're treating patients, but they also are doing research.
Okay.
And what they're looking at is, what can I do in my research to impact my patients? And so for us, it was a really great story to interact with them and explain the technology and all the pain points that it covers. But moreover, magnetic particle imaging is translatable to the clinic. And so magnetic particle imaging will be in the clinic in the next few years. And so they understand that by investing in this technology and really diving into new workflows, it's going to be in front of their patients in not too long in the future.
So I guess the commonality is always get the message of how you are helping them achieve their goals, whether it is an investor or whether it's a scientist that is deciding your grant, or whether it is a client deciding to make the purchase of not. Which one is harder?
I would say the scientists, the sales. I personally, I mean, investors are difficult. I think it was more of us changing our pitch and really speaking their language. But scientists are incredibly critical, as they should be. And when a new technology comes, I would say our problem was it's too good to be true. It must be fake. You know, the data you're showing me is probably not real.
Wow.
And so having them work with us in a very collaborative process to get them familiar with what we were doing and, you know, work with them on the technology, that's when we started getting believers. And they became our champions. And once we got past that, we developed a set of champions that said, no, I got data, this is it. And they would show their colleagues, and it would go from there. The best sales pitch is having a customer pitch it to another customer.
Yeah. That comes from the commercial world.
Yeah, of course. So on the scientific side, when we were initially starting out with the technology, nobody wants to fund something they don't know that's going to work. So that sounds sort of circular. So the NIH, they're very good at taking risks, but then it's also a balance between taking too much risk and taking too little risk. And so in talking with a lot of the other scientists, it's where do we find that balance? And so when we were initially starting out, it was clear it was too far beyond. Like, it's just, you know, how often does a group write a grant and say, hey, we're going to invent a new imaging modality. We're just going to, you know, start from scratch. And so it didn't work. And so it took us many years to build the credibility with outside funding sources, and in particular, California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, which was just like, we're going to try some out there stuff. And they took the plunge with us. And so with that money, we got to the point where we had just enough working, where when we went back to our colleagues through grants to the NIH, people are like, okay, I think this actually does work. And that's when we started to really, you know, that snowball starts to go down the hill, and where we really started to build all of the expertise necessary, you know, training a bunch of students, building hardware, having the funding to be able to do all of that. And finally, when we came to the company, we'd already built that foundation where scientists were slowly coming around. Not very many even knew about it. I mean, you know, just within the halls of the review committee, and, you know, a modest number of papers. And here we are building an entire sales organization. We're really getting the word out, and people are starting to really come on board. When a group invests, you know, $600,000 to buy one of our machines, like, they're putting, you know, parts of their career on the line.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like from the scientist point of view, that's my biggest validation that I could have. That, I mean, I'm not in this for the money. I'm in this because I want to build this technology to the point where a lot of people use it, where who knows, maybe my mom will get an MPI scan someday. And that takes a whole lot more than, something in the lab, a technology where, we're still on the bench. No, we got to make this big.
Yeah. I have some questions from the audience that I'm going to read because I don't remember them all. What advice do you give scientists that are considering taking their research into the commercial world?
Find industry experience. So a lot of scientists, or I wouldn't say a lot, some scientists come into academia with some industry experience and they're going back and forth. I would say that's a very small minority. But to start a company that's selling into all of these fields, which are very well established, it's just invaluable to bring someone in that really knows what they're doing and knows it from the other side.
And that works in your particular industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There's so much internal industry experience that it just, if I pulled in someone if Anna didn't have experience in medical imaging and preclinical imaging, it would just be, I don't know what we do. Just the amount of internal expertise that she's brought in, and I'm talking salespeople, like application scientists, sales workflows, just the, where do we market? What are the conferences we go to? All of that's just internal to our field. Someone else off the street would not know it.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for our scientists?
I think there's a lot of opportunity in industry. And I think every scientist should test out the industry. The reality is that to really touch people with what you do in the lab sort of needs to end up in the industry. And understanding how industry works is great. It's not just selling, it's developing it out so that it's commercial. And what I mean is you can have some great ideas in the lab, but does that idea have a purpose in the world out there? And how big is that market? Really understanding the translation from a technology born out of an idea to making an impact on a need, and understanding that. I think it also makes better scientists. If you do decide to go back into the academic world, you think of your projects in a different way, because you think of, well, I'm working on this sort of technology that will help 500 people, or I can work on a different technology that I know is a pain point for millions, right? Having that is an important thing.
Have you seen a lot of scientists like Patrick reaching out for people that work in the commercial world?
We get calls all the time. We meet folks all the time who have an idea and who think of starting their own company or want to get into the industry. Even though there's Patrick's old team, I think now we're growing to a place where they're not the majority, they're the minority.
They are.
and we got some fantastic folks out of their PhDs and postdocs that just accelerated us, brought, they're holding their own in this company. And they found their way in a commercial setting that still gives them that scientific feeding. They're still feeding themselves with science.
But I do want to have a point here. That is, if the scientist is not looking at you and bringing you on board, because that was just luck, because not a lot of scientists have the capacity to recognize that they need an industry expert and go and ask for that. So if the scientist is not looking for that, maybe we need more people from the corporate world looking and thinking, maybe I can help this person. Maybe we can start a company, because this is really the type of teams that we need, with good technology and good commercial industry expertise to make these things happen faster, because they're going to happen. But it's just, you make it faster, you de-risk it, you need less money. And going back to money, have you ever said no to an investor?
Yes.
Okay. On what basis?
It just wasn't a good fit.
Okay. How do you know if it's a good fit or not?
I think, like, when you meet anyone, if you don't have the right, money is not everything. It could be the wrong terms. It could be just the personalities. An investor as we see it, they become part of this family.
Mm-hmm.
They're in it for us to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And the intention of the investor needs to be that way. And that, for me, that's like a clear filter. You know, are we a great commodity, an IP, you know, element, or something that, you know, can be turned around, or is this something that they really see what we're developing and can create valuation behind and support the team to do it and feel that we're the right people to do it? That's probably the most important part. But again, investors, they become part of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And we embrace them as part of the company. We bring them in to happy hours and to our parties, and they meet everyone during board meetings. We'll have, you know, a good part of the company present to the board meeting, so they can understand who we're working, how the team works together. So they get pulled into the fold quite a bit. They're not here just to watch over us and do the checks and balances on a quarterly basis. We like it that the board is tightly involved with us. So for us, it's go time to develop the market, valuation, transition from a development company to a manufacturing company. And so that's exciting. And then on the technology side, you know, we're also going to be developing a larger system for large animals and a human. And so being able to get closer to impacting humans is real exciting.
It's a very interesting transition for the company and for myself personally, as we're so for the past few years, this is what we've been an R&D arm and sales and marketing. That's it. So here we're heading into a whole new territory where, all right, so we still have R&D, that's staying pretty constant, but then around it is growing a whole of marketing and sales. That's our focus, and manufacturing and support. Because now we have all these systems in the field, it just multiplies the support. So here it's just a huge transition for the company, where we're going from essentially a, you know, as small as a startup as you can be, to something where we're a true small company selling product. We have customers that we want to make happy. We have, you know, marketing needs to be fed with all sorts of new data. We have to make that actually happen. You know, building, just there's a lot to do, and it's a lot of fun, and it's not something that they train me for in academia.
We have instruments all around the globe, and that's a great thing because the science community is a global community. And we talk to partners and collaborators on a daily basis. And so if you have a great idea or want to start working on magnetic particle imaging, get on our website, and there's links for emails, and they can always get a hold of us.
There's so many questions, but there's one that I really appreciate is, how do you prepare emotionally? Talk about, nobody trains you to do that. How do you prepare emotionally to go and raise funds? I remember being nervous and being afraid of rejection, and how do you, and a lot of people that are watching, they don't know how to face uncertainty. More than risk is uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. How do you prepare for that? Do you have any tips for people? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so you know, it's sort of interesting. You know, I've been in corporate America, sitting in boardrooms, meeting rooms, and talking to executives most of my career. And so that nervousness of I shouldn't be here, or I won't be able to answer their questions, I don't think it was that difficult, because you sort of eventually learn, if you don't know an answer, you just say you don't know the answer.
Okay.
And you got to get comfortable with that, right? And I think it's more appreciated on the other side too. I don't think I really got stunned or very nervous, because again, you're dating. That's as I see it. When you're meeting investors, you're trying to meet people that see the opportunity, that want to be a part of this. And if they don't, if they just sit back and they're just sort of giving you really just questions that either is them trying to act smart, you know, you get a lot of people who want to just ask questions just to prove that they know, or they asking questions because they're actually interested in trying to figure out what's the business model, what's the market, you know, what's your exit. You know, after you pitch after a few whiles, you know, you sort of get into that groove. You sort of know what they're going to ask for or how to answer to things. And the preparation would be, I would say as we developed our pitch, it would morph, and it would become more and more targeted to different investor segments. And so we made sure we tested it out. We tested it out on each other. If someone, we knew we were in a room full of physicians, or a room full of physicists, or a room full of VCs that never have seen a medical equipment company before. How do we explain the technology? How do we not make it overly scientific? And so that's where we practiced it. I would say that would be probably the most prep that we did.
So oddly enough, I think academia was a good preparation for me here, where I'm just comfortable doing presentations after having done so many over the years. So if I'm talking about our technology now, and this is something that I routinely have to do, is just part of either the marketing sales is asking me to do like a presentation to an outside possible customer or lead, or I'm talking to an academic group, or like most recently, I was at Florida installing one of our systems, and they're just like, hey, can you give us an hour talk? And I'm at the point now where I'm very happily like, all right, if someone wants a 15-minute to an hour talk, give me 10 minutes and you'll get one. So when it comes to questions that we get from investors, a lot of it is like, I'm just comfortable being in front of a group just because it's been beaten out of me. So for so many years, that it's just like, this is just like another normal meeting. And so it's been a transition for me though. So early in my graduate career, I don't think I was ready for that. And it took a number of years of practice, and it's a comfortable thing now. And of course, being in these meetings with Anna's very comfortable too.
Yeah.
So I think we bring a very calm presence to some of these meetings. I hope that's what it was, at least. Yeah. And I think it's turned out well.
I think the dynamic, one of our major investors, I think what tipped them off was having co-founders that have a good dynamic. Was something that they mentioned continuously, that it was, you didn't have two co-founders that were at each other and trying to talk above each other, or especially when you have two technical co-founders, that can get contentious. So I think it's good that you have, before you go into a pitch, you sort of pre-play, these are your slides, these are my slides. And we're okay jumping in and just, because I'll forget to say some value point. He'll remember it, and that's just fine.
I think one of the things that at least impressed me was the capacity to be cool about the whole process, because I know how stressful it is to run a company. Yeah. No matter how small, how big, it's just really stressful. And for me to see that you just could answer questions without being too stressed, make me feel that you would be cool running the company through the hardships that sometimes we have. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for the questions. We'll have more questions coming up too. And do you have any last words for the people that are watching?
No, we look forward to answering your questions. It's been an exciting ride, and we're happy to share.
And thank you for coming to listen to us. And I hope we get some great questions.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye.